My identical twin sister showed up at my door at 2 in the morning, face bruised, lip bleeding, crying so hard she could barely speak. She begged me to switch places with her for 1 week. Just 7 days pretending to be her while she recovered somewhere safe. I looked at the fingerprint bruises on her arms, the terror in her eyes that were identical to mine, and I said yes. Her husband Marcus had no idea we'd switched. For 6 days, I played the perfect obedient wife while documenting everything. On day 7, I invited him to our childhood cabin for a romantic weekend. He thought he was going with my sister Emma. He had no idea he was about to face both of us, and the lesson we taught him in that cabin wasn't just brutal. It was permanent. What happened when he realized there were 2 of us is something he'll never forget, and something that ended his reign of terror in a way the courts never could. The knock on my door at 2:17 a.m. was frantic, desperate, the kind of sound that pulls you from sleep with your heart already racing. I stumbled through my apartment in Seattle, checking the peephole out of habit, even though I already knew who it had to be at this hour. Only one person would show up at my door in the middle of the night without calling first. Emma, my identical twin sister, my other half, the person who shared my face, my DNA, 28 years of memories, and a bond that went deeper than most people could understand. But when I opened the door, the face looking back at me was mine and not mine at the same time. Same green eyes, same dark blonde hair, same small scar above the left eyebrow from when we'd crashed our bikes together at age 7. But her left eye was swelling shut, turning purple already. Her bottom lip was split, crusted with dried blood, and when she held out her hands, I saw bruises on her wrists shaped exactly like fingers, like someone had grabbed her hard enough to leave a mark that would last for days. "Livy," she whispered, using the nickname only she was allowed to use. "I need your help, please." I pulled her inside, locked the door, and took her straight to my bathroom where the light was brightest. She flinched when I touched her face, examining the damage with hands that were shaking with a rage I'd never felt before. Someone had hurt my sister. Someone had put their hands on her and caused this damage, this terror in her eyes that I could feel in my own chest, like we were still sharing a heartbeat the way we had in the womb. "Marcus?" I asked, even though I already knew the answer. She nodded, tears streaming down her face, mixing with the blood from her lip. "It's been getting worse. Tonight he lost it because dinner wasn't ready when he got home. I was 10 minutes late getting it on the table. 10 minutes, Livy, and he snapped." Marcus Chen, the man my sister had married 3 years ago in a ceremony I'd been maid of honor at, smiling in photos while something in my gut whispered that this was wrong, that this man who was so charming in public had something dark underneath. Emma had been so happy that day, so certain she'd found her person. I'd ignored my instincts because I wanted her to be happy. Now she was sitting on my bathroom counter with a split lip and fingerprint bruises, and I'd never hated myself more for not speaking up 3 years ago. "Have you called the police?" I asked, already knowing the answer. "I can't. Livy, you don't understand. He's so careful. He's never hit me anywhere that shows when I'm dressed. He's never done it in front of anyone else. And he's a senior partner at his law firm. He knows exactly how to make me look crazy if I try to report him. He's told me exactly what he'll do if I ever try to leave, how he'll destroy me in divorce court, how he'll make sure everyone knows I'm unstable." I cleaned her face gently while she talked, each word making the rage in my chest grow hotter. This was textbook abuser behavior, escalating violence, isolation, threats, using his position as a lawyer to make her afraid of legal action. He'd been grooming her for this, breaking her down piece by piece until she believed she had no options. But what Emma said next would give me an idea so risky and so potentially perfect that I knew immediately we were going to do it, no matter the consequences. "I need to disappear for a week," Emma said, her voice steadier now, like making the decision to come here had given her back some of her strength. "Just 7 days to heal, to think, to figure out what to do next. But if I just vanish, he'll call the police. He'll report me missing. He'll track my credit cards, my phone, everything. I need him to think I'm still there." Our eyes met in the bathroom mirror. Two identical faces, one bruised, one untouched, both thinking the same impossible thought at exactly the same moment. "We switch," I said. "It's crazy," Emma whispered. "It's perfect," I countered. "We've done it before." We had. As kids, we'd swapped places constantly. Our parents could tell us apart, but teachers couldn't. Friends couldn't. We'd traded classes, dates, even a driver's test once when Emma had been too nervous to take it herself. We'd been identical in every measurable way, and we'd used it as a superpower when we were young and didn't understand how dark that power could be turned. "For 1 week," Emma said, "you pretend to be me. Stay at the house. Act like everything is normal. And I'll go somewhere he can't find me. Somewhere I can heal and think." "And while I'm pretending to be you," I said, the plan forming as I spoke, "I'll document everything. Every controlling behavior, every threat, every moment of abuse. I'll gather evidence that a lawyer can't explain away. Evidence that will destroy him if he ever tries to claim you're the unstable one. Livy, he could hurt you. He could try. But I'm not you, Emma. I'm not broken down from 3 years of living with him. I'm not scared of him. And I know exactly what I'm walking into while you went in blind, thinking you'd married someone safe." I took her hands carefully, avoiding the bruises. "Let me do this. Let me be you for 1 week while you become me. Let me get the evidence you need to bury him." She was quiet for a long time, and I could see her processing it, weighing the risks, the possibilities. We were identical twins. We'd shared everything our entire lives. Why not share this too? Why not use the gift of our identical faces to protect each other from someone who'd been using his power to hurt someone who couldn't fight back? 1 week, she finally agreed. 7 days, and then we switch back, and I file for divorce with enough evidence that he can't destroy me. We spent the next 4 hours planning. Emma told me everything about her life with Marcus. The morning routine, where everything was kept in the house, his schedule, his habits, his triggers. She told me about the ways he controlled her, the things he demanded, the personality she'd been forced to adopt to keep him calm. "He expects dinner at exactly 6:30, she said. "Everything has to be perfect. The house has to be spotless. I'm supposed to have his scotch poured and waiting when he gets home. I'm not allowed to have opinions about his work, his friends, his decisions. I'm just supposed to smile and agree and be grateful." With every detail, I understood more clearly what my sister had been living through. This wasn't just occasional violence. This was systematic control. A man who'd taken my vibrant, opinionated sister and tried to reshape her into a silent, obedient doll who existed to serve him. "He hasn't hit you before tonight?" I asked. "He's grabbed me, pushed me, held me down when I tried to leave an argument. But actual hitting, punching, that's new. That's why I ran. Because I knew if I stayed, it would keep escalating. That tonight was a line crossed and there was no going back." She was right. Domestic violence research showed that once physical violence escalated to hitting, it rarely de-escalated. It only got worse. Marcus had shown her exactly who he was tonight, and she'd been smart enough and brave enough to run. What Emma didn't know was that Marcus had also given me exactly the opening I needed to document the kind of systematic abuse that courts actually took seriously, and by the end of this week, her husband would have sealed his own fate. By 6 a.m., we'd worked out every detail. Emma gave me her wedding ring, her phone, her keys, the codes to the house alarm, and her car. She walked me through photo albums showing me with Marcus, their friends, places they'd been together. She told me about his mother who called every Sunday, his best friend Trevor who came over for poker nights, his secretary Diane who Marcus complained about constantly. I studied her mannerisms, the way she learned to make herself smaller around him, the quiet voice she used, the way she'd stopped making eye contact. It made me sick watching my strong sister demonstrate the broken version of herself she'd become, but I needed to see it to replicate it convincingly. Emma cut my hair to match hers exactly, the same length, the same style she'd been wearing. We were identical already, but 3 years of marriage had changed subtle things. She'd lost weight from stress. I'd gained muscle from the rock climbing I did every weekend, but dressed in her clothes, wearing her wedding ring, copying her diminished posture, I could pass for her. We'd done it 100 times before. This was just higher stakes. "What about you?" I asked as the sun started rising. "Where will you go?" "Our cousin Rachel has a cabin in the San Juan Islands. She's in Europe for the month. I have her spare key. No one knows about it except family. Marcus has never met her. I'll go there, turn off my phone, and just exist. As myself, not as his wife." We'd always been close with our cousin Rachel, who'd sensed something was wrong with Emma's marriage, but hadn't known how to help. She'd be happy her cabin was being used to shelter Emma, even if she didn't know about it until later. By 7 a.m., we'd switched lives. Emma left my apartment wearing my clothes, carrying my purse, looking like me. She'd stay here for the day, then head to the cabin tonight using my car. Anyone who saw her would just see Olivia going about her normal life. And I drove to Bellevue in Emma's Mercedes, using the GPS to navigate to the house I'd only visited twice since she'd married Marcus. A beautiful craftsman-style home in a wealthy neighborhood, the kind of house that looked perfect from the outside with no hint of the darkness within. I parked in the garage, disabled the alarm with Emma's code, and walked into my sister's life. The house was immaculate, not clean, immaculate. Everything in its exact place, no personal touches, no mess, no sign that actual humans lived here. It looked like a magazine spread, sterile and perfect, and completely devoid of warmth. This was what Marcus demanded. This was the environment Emma had been maintaining while walking on eggshells, trying to prevent his rage. I found the bedroom and saw more of the same. Bed made with hospital corners, closet organized by color and season. Emma's side of the bathroom counter completely clear, while Marcus's was covered with expensive grooming products. She'd been erased from her own home, made invisible, reduced to a ghost who cooked and cleaned and never left evidence of her existence. In the kitchen, I found the detailed schedule Emma had told me about. Written in her handwriting, taped inside a cabinet where Marcus apparently checked it. Monday through Sunday, every meal planned, every chore listed, every expectation documented. She'd been living her life on a schedule he'd created, with no room for spontaneity or choice. I took photos of everything with my phone, which I'd switched to airplane mode so Marcus couldn't see any notifications that weren't Emma's. Every controlling detail, every sign of systematic abuse, every piece of evidence that this marriage wasn't a partnership but a dictatorship. But the real evidence I needed wouldn't come from the house. It would come from Marcus himself, and I'd have to be perfect in my performance to get him to reveal himself on camera without knowing he was being recorded. At exactly 5:45 p.m., I heard the garage door open. Marcus was home. I'd spent the day preparing, cooking the meal Emma had told me he expected on Mondays, cleaning the already spotless house, setting up tiny cameras in 3 rooms that looked like ordinary household objects. A clock in the living room, a picture frame in the kitchen, a charging station in the bedroom, all of them recording, all of them hidden in plain sight. I'd also set up my phone to record audio continuously, hidden in my pocket, a backup in case the cameras missed anything. Marcus walked through the door in his expensive suit, his lawyer armor, looking exactly like the photos I'd studied. Tall, handsome in a sharp-featured way, perfectly groomed, radiating the kind of confidence that came from always being the smartest person in the room, or thinking he was. "Emma," he said, his voice neutral, revealing nothing. "Welcome home," I said, using Emma's quiet voice, her submissive posture. "Dinner will be ready in 10 minutes. Your scotch is on the counter." He looked at me, really looked, and I felt my heart race. This was the moment. Could he tell? We were identical, but would he sense somehow that I wasn't his wife? "You look different," he said, and I froze. "Different how?" I asked, careful to sound nervous, not defensive. Emma would be nervous at any observation that implied she wasn't meeting expectations. "I don't know. Something about your face." He stepped closer, studying me, and I forced myself to meet his eyes briefly before looking down the way Emma had taught me she did. Enough eye contact to not seem suspicious, not enough to seem challenging. Then he smiled, and it wasn't a nice smile. "Did you put makeup over something, Emma? Do you have a bruise you're trying to hide?" My blood went cold. He was testing me, seeing if I'd admit to the bruise from last night, seeing how I'd react. This was a game to him, psychological warfare he played with my sister constantly. "I bruised my cheek on the cabinet this morning," I said, using the excuse Emma and I had prepared. "I was reaching for something and misjudged the distance. It's nothing." "Let me see." I turned my face toward him, and he examined the makeup I'd carefully applied to match the fading bruises Emma had shown me from previous incidents. Not the fresh ones from last night. Those were on her face, not mine. But older marks that he'd know should still be visible. "You need to be more careful," he said, his thumb brushing the spot roughly enough to hurt. "Clumsy." "Yes," I agreed quietly. "I'm sorry." He accepted it, took his scotch, and sat in the living room while I finished dinner. My hands were shaking with rage, but I kept Emma's calm exterior. He'd touched me like he owned me, like he had the right to examine me for damage he'd caused, and he'd blamed me for it. This was what Emma lived with every day, this casual cruelty disguised as concern. Over dinner, he talked about his day at the firm, a big case he was working on, office politics I was supposed to care about. I played Emma's role perfectly, asking occasional questions, showing interest, never offering opinions. He didn't ask about my day because he didn't care. I was scenery, a servant who happened to look like a wife. After dinner, he watched TV while I cleaned up. This was the routine Emma had described. He'd watch sports or news until 10 p.m., then expect me to join him in bed where he'd either ignore me or demand sex without consideration for what I wanted. Either way, I'd be expected to be available and grateful. But tonight was only night one. I needed him to show me more. I needed him to reveal the control, the threats, the systematic abuse that would make a judge understand this wasn't just a bad marriage, but a dangerous one. "Emma," he called from the living room, "come here." I walked in, standing where he could see me but not close enough to touch. "Sit," he said, patting the couch beside him. I sat, keeping Emma's careful distance, her body language that tried to be present without taking up too much space. "I've been thinking," Marcus said, and something in his tone made me alert. "About us, about this marriage. You've been very good lately, very obedient, almost like you finally understand how things need to be." "I'm trying," I said quietly. "I know last night was unfortunate. I lost my temper. You understand that was your fault, right? If you'd had dinner ready on time, if you'd been paying attention instead of wasting time on your phone, none of that would have happened." He was rewriting history, making last night's violence my sister's fault. This was textbook abuser behavior, and hearing it in person made me understand how Emma had stayed trapped in this. When someone you loved told you constantly that abuse was your fault, eventually you started to believe it. "I understand," I said, the words tasting like poison. "Good, because I need you to understand something else." He turned to face me fully, his expression serious. "If you ever think about leaving, if you ever think about telling anyone what happens in this house, I will destroy you. I'm a lawyer, Emma. I know exactly how to make you look unstable. I have documentation of your medication, your therapy, your anxiety issues. I can paint a picture of a woman who's mentally unfit, who made up stories about abuse because she's delusional. And I'll take everything, the house, the savings, your reputation. You'll be left with nothing, and no one will believe you." Every word he spoke was being recorded, evidence that Marcus's treatment of my sister wasn't hidden. He did it in front of his friends because they all thought this was normal. But on day 4, something happened that I hadn't planned for, and what Marcus did would force me to accelerate the timeline and bring Emma back sooner than we'd agreed. I'd been maintaining Emma's social media, posting occasional bland updates that looked like her usual, carefully curated life. But on day 4, her mother called. Our mother, technically, though she'd always favored Emma in ways that had created tension between us. "Emma, honey," Mom said when I answered, and I'd forgotten how to perfectly mimic Emma's phone voice. "I've been worried about you. You sound different. Are you sick?" "Just a cold," I said, trying to adjust my voice. "Nothing serious." "Well, I wanted to let you know your father and I will be in Seattle next week. We'd love to have dinner with you and Marcus. Maybe Friday?" Panic. Emma and I hadn't planned for this. If our parents saw me pretending to be Emma, they'd know immediately. Unlike Marcus and his friends, our mother could tell us apart. She'd raised us. She'd see through the switch in seconds. "Next week is really busy," I said. "Marcus has a big case, and I don't think we can make Friday work." "What about Saturday or Sunday?" "Emma, we haven't seen you in months. You keep making excuses. Is everything all right? Is Marcus treating you well?" She almost knew. Almost. But like a lot of people who sense something's wrong, she was asking without really wanting to know the answer, hoping I'd reassure her so she didn't have to face something uncomfortable. "Everything's fine, Mom. Marcus is wonderful. I've just been busy with the house and supporting his career. You know how it is." "I don't actually," she said, and there was an edge to her voice. "Your father has never expected me to disappear into his life. Emma, if something's wrong—" "Nothing's wrong," I interrupted, too sharp, not enough like Emma's careful placating. "I have to go, Mom. I'll call you about dinner when I check Marcus's schedule." I hung up before she could press further, and immediately texted Emma to warn her that Mom was suspicious. She'd have to handle their parents when we switched back, have to explain why I'd sounded off on the phone. But the bigger problem was, Marcus had heard the whole conversation. He was standing in the kitchen doorway, arms crossed, face unreadable. "Your mother's coming to Seattle?" he asked. "She mentioned it. I told her we're busy." "We are busy. I don't want them here. Your parents ask too many questions. Your mother looks at you like she's trying to figure out what's wrong. Last time they visited, she cornered you in the kitchen and asked if you were happy. Do you remember that?" I didn't because I wasn't Emma, but I nodded. "And do you remember what you told her?" Marcus continued, walking closer. "That I'm very happy," I said, guessing. "Exactly, because you are happy. You have everything you could want, a beautiful home, financial security, a husband who takes care of everything. Your mother needs to understand that her concern is misplaced, that you're not some victim who needs rescuing." The way he said victim with such contempt told me everything about how he viewed Emma's situation. He knew exactly what he was doing. This wasn't a man who'd accidentally become controlling. This was someone who deliberately constructed a prison for my sister and enjoyed keeping her there. "She's just being a mom," I said carefully. "She's being intrusive, and you need to shut it down. If your parents visit, you will convince them everything is perfect. You will not give them any reason to worry or interfere. Do you understand?" "I understand." "Good. Because, Emma, I need you to know something." He was very close now, too close, invading my space the way Emma had told me he did when he wanted to intimidate her. "If anyone ever tries to come between us, if anyone ever tries to convince you that you'd be better off leaving me, I'll make sure they regret it. Your parents, your sister, anyone. I'll destroy their reputations, their careers, their lives. I protect what's mine." Every word was recorded, every threat documented, And what Marcus didn't realize was that he'd just given me exactly the evidence I needed to end this before our parents got involved and before Emma had to face him again. That night, after Marcus fell asleep, I sat in the bathroom with my phone reviewing all the footage I'd captured over 4 days. Hours of systematic control, threats, psychological abuse, and admissions that he'd deliberately isolated my sister. I had everything I needed to protect Emma legally. But the lawyer in me, the part that had spent 2 years in law school before switching to software development, knew that legal protection wasn't always the same as actual safety. Marcus was a senior partner at one of Seattle's most prestigious law firms. He knew how to manipulate the legal system. Even with this evidence, a restraining order was just paper. Divorce proceedings could take months, and during that time he'd be looking for Emma, trying to regain control, using every legal trick he knew to drag things out and terrorize her. I texted Emma on the encrypted app we'd set up. "Need to talk. Call me when he's definitely asleep." She called 10 minutes later, her voice stronger than it had been when she'd shown up at my door. 4 days of safety had already started healing something in her. "What's wrong?" she asked. "Nothing's wrong. Everything's actually perfect. I have so much evidence that his lawyer will tell him to accept whatever terms you offer in the divorce. But Ems, I've been thinking about something. Legal consequences might not be enough to actually stop him." "What do you mean?" "I mean, men like Marcus don't stop because a judge tells them to. They don't respect authority when it comes from outside their worldview. They only respect power, and specifically the power to hurt them back in ways they can't fight with money or legal maneuvering." Silence on the line. Then quietly, "What are you suggesting?" "I'm suggesting we teach him a lesson he'll never forget. Not illegal, nothing that will blow back on you legally, but something that breaks whatever makes him think he can control people through fear, something that makes him afraid. Livy, he's bigger than you, stronger. If you confront him—" "Not me alone, both of us. That's the point. I think we should use our twin advantage one more time." I took a breath, the plan forming as I spoke. "Tomorrow, I'm going to suggest a romantic weekend at Rachel's cabin. Just me and him, supposedly, to reconnect and work on our marriage. He'll think he's going with submissive Emma, who's trying to please him. Instead, he's going to walk into a cabin where both of us are waiting. And then what? Then we show him what it feels like to be powerless, to have his reality questioned, to not know what's real and what's manipulation. We give him a taste of the psychological torture he's been putting you through, and we make sure he understands that if he ever comes near you again, it gets worse." What I didn't tell Emma yet was exactly how brutal the lesson would be, because I needed her to agree to come before she could talk herself out of the only thing that would actually make Marcus too terrified to ever hurt her again. "This is crazy," Emma whispered. "This is necessary. You can file for divorce with the evidence I've gathered, and maybe he respects the restraining order. Or maybe he doesn't. Maybe he shows up at your new apartment, at your workplace, at our parents' house. Maybe he makes your life hell for years because you dared to leave him. Or we do this my way, and he's too scared to ever come near you again. What if he calls the police? What if he tries to have us arrested? For what? We're not going to touch him. We're not going to threaten him with violence. We're just going to make him question his own sanity for a few hours, using nothing but our identical faces and the psychological manipulation he's been using on you. Fight fire with fire." I could hear her breathing on the other end of the line, processing, weighing the risks. Finally, she asked, "When?" "This weekend. I'll suggest it tomorrow, frame it as me trying to save our marriage. He'll jump at it because it means more control, more isolation, you trying to please him. Saturday morning we drive up. You're already at the cabin. And Saturday night we switch. He goes to sleep with one twin and wakes up with both of us. He could hurt us. He won't. Because the moment he realizes there are two of us, the moment he understands he can't tell us apart, and never has been able to, every ounce of control he thought he had disappears. We'll have the power, and we'll use it to make sure he never forgets what happens when you abuse someone who has an identical twin." She was quiet for a long time. Then, "Okay, but Livy, promise me we don't do anything that could get you arrested. I can't lose you over this." "I promise. Everything we do will be legal, documented, and designed to protect you. But it will also be terrifying for him. That's the point." We spent the next hour planning every detail. Emma would stay at the cabin, preparing for Saturday. I would convince Marcus that a romantic weekend was exactly what our marriage needed, and on Saturday night, Marcus Chen would learn exactly what it felt like to have his reality manipulated by someone he'd underestimated. Friday morning, I made Marcus his favorite breakfast and brought it to him in bed, playing the perfect attentive wife. He looked surprised, which told me Emma had stopped doing things like this a long time ago after learning that kindness didn't prevent his cruelty. "What's this?" he asked, suspicious even of nice gestures. "I've been thinking about us," I said, using Emma's soft voice. "About our marriage. I know I haven't been the wife you deserve lately. I want to do better. I thought maybe we could go away this weekend, just the two of us. Reconnect." "Where?" Still suspicious, looking for the trap. "My family has a cabin in the San Juan Islands. It's been empty all month while my cousin's in Europe. We could have the whole weekend. No distractions, no work, just us. I could cook your favorite meals, we could talk, and I could show you how committed I am to making this marriage work." I watched him process it. A weekend alone with his wife in an isolated cabin where she'd be trying to please him, where there'd be no witnesses, where he'd have complete control. His expression shifted from suspicious to satisfied. "That actually sounds perfect," he said. "I'll clear my schedule." "Thank you," I said, adding a smile that looked grateful but felt like baring teeth. "I think this will be really good for us." He had no idea how good it would be. For us, not for him. I spent Friday packing, preparing, and sending Emma detailed messages about our plan. She was scared but determined. 4 days away from Marcus had reminded her who she used to be before he'd spent 3 years trying to erase her. She wanted that person back, and she was willing to do what it took to make sure Marcus could never take her away again. Saturday morning, Marcus loaded our bags into Emma's Mercedes while I did one final check of the house. The cameras were still recording, storing footage to cloud storage he didn't know existed. When we came back, I'd collect them. But for now, they were insurance, backup evidence if anything went wrong this weekend. The drive to the ferry terminal took an hour, then another hour on the ferry to the islands. Marcus was in a good mood, talking about cases at work, about the cabin weekend being a good idea, about how he knew I'd come around and understand how our marriage needed to be. He thought I'd been broken. He thought he'd won. He had no idea the weekend he was driving toward would be his worst nightmare. We arrived at Rachel's cabin around 2 p.m. It was exactly as I remembered from childhood visits, a rustic A-frame surrounded by pine trees overlooking the water, miles from the nearest neighbor. Private, isolated, perfect. Emma's car was hidden in the garage. She'd arrived yesterday and had spent the time preparing the cabin exactly according to our plan. To Marcus, everything looked normal, a cozy retreat where his wife would spend the weekend trying to please him. "This is nice, Roland," he said, looking around the main room with its stone fireplace and comfortable furniture. "Very private." "I thought you'd like that," I said. "No one to bother us, no interruptions." We spent the afternoon in careful performance. I cooked dinner while he sat by the fireplace with a book, checking his phone occasionally, but mostly relaxed. This was what he wanted, a wife who served him without complaint in a setting where he had complete control. After dinner, I suggested we watch a movie. I poured him whiskey, extra generous, and made sure his glass stayed full. Not enough to make him sloppy drunk, just enough to slow his reflexes and dull his alertness. Just enough that when things started happening, he'd question whether it was real or the alcohol. By 10 p.m., he was relaxed, drowsy, ready for bed. "This was a good idea," he said, pulling me close in a possessive gesture that made my skin crawl. "Tomorrow we should talk about some changes I want to make, about your role, your responsibilities, about making sure this improvement continues." "Of course," I agreed. "Whatever you think is best." We went to the bedroom. He fell asleep within minutes, the whiskey and the long day catching up with him. I waited 30 minutes to be sure he was deeply asleep. Then I texted Emma the signal. She emerged from the guest room where she'd been hiding all evening, and we stood together in the hallway, two identical faces, looking at each other with a mixture of fear and determination. "Ready?" I whispered. "Ready," she confirmed. What happened next would systematically destroy every assumption Marcus had built his abuse on, and by morning, he would be questioning everything he thought he knew about reality and control. Emma went into the bedroom first, while I waited in the hallway. She climbed into bed beside Marcus, taking my place, becoming his wife again. He stirred slightly, but didn't wake, too deep in sleep to notice the switch. I set my phone to record and placed it on the dresser, angle perfect to capture the whole room. Then I set an alarm for 3 a.m., the deadest part of night when humans are most disoriented, most vulnerable to confusion. When the alarm went off, Emma and I were both standing at the foot of the bed, identical nightgowns, identical hair, identical faces. Two of the same person where he expected one. Marcus woke slowly, groggy, reaching for the nightstand lamp. "When manipulated," Emma said. "To question what's real," I said. "To be powerless," Emma said. "To be afraid," we said together. What we did over the next 4 hours wasn't violence, wasn't illegal, but it was the most psychologically brutal thing I'd ever participated in, and by sunrise, Marcus would be broken in ways that would never fully heal. We started with the gaslighting he'd used on Emma for 3 years. Every time he'd make a statement, we'd contradict him in unison. When he said he knew which one was his wife, we'd switch positions when he blinked and ask him if he was sure. When he tried to find differences between us, we'd mirror each other's movements so perfectly that he couldn't focus on one without losing track of the other. "This isn't real," he kept saying. "This is a trick. You're drugging me. This is the alcohol. I'm hallucinating." "Are you?" I asked. "Is that easier to believe than accepting you married someone without ever really knowing who she was?" Emma asked. "Is it easier to think you're hallucinating than to accept you've been living with a woman you can't identify?" I asked. "That you've been hurting someone whose identity you can't even confirm?" Emma asked. "How do you know it was really Emma you hit on Monday night?" I asked. "How do you know it wasn't Olivia?" Emma asked. "How do you know you weren't hitting the wrong twin?" we asked together. I watched the horror dawn in his face as we'd planned. He was a lawyer. He understood reasonable doubt, and we were creating so much doubt in his mind that he was questioning everything he'd done, everything he'd believed he controlled. We showed him photos from his week with me, the cameras I'd hidden, the footage of him making threats, being cruel, admitting to systematic abuse. Then we showed him photos from the same week with Emma, identical moments captured from different angles. "Which week did you live?" I asked. "Which Emma were you with?" Emma asked. "How can you be sure?" we asked together. We played recordings of his voice making threats, played them in surround sound from speakers Emma had set up around the cabin. His own words, his own admissions, coming from everywhere at once while two identical faces watched him process what we were doing. "You threatened to destroy anyone who tried to help your wife leave you," I said. "But which wife now?" Emma asked. "If you can't tell us apart," I said. "How will you know who to destroy?" Emma asked. "How will you know which twin to hurt?" I asked. "How will you know which family to threaten?" Emma asked. "You've lost all control, Marcus," we said together, "and you'll never get it back." He tried to run. We let him get to the door, let him fling it open, let him see the dark forest surrounding the cabin. Then we appeared on either side of the doorway, identical, blocking nothing but present everywhere. "Where will you go?" I asked. Which direction do you trust? Emma asked. How do you know we're not outside too? I asked. Everything her lawyer puts in front of you, Emma said. You're not going to fight it, I said. You're not going to drag it out, Emma said. You're going to give her everything, Rachel, we said together. And if you don't, I continued. If you try to fight, Emma continued. If you try to hurt her, I said. If you try to find her, Emma said. If you violate the restraining order, I said. If you come anywhere near her, Emma said. This happens again, we said together, but worse. I pulled up footage on my phone showing every room in his house. We've been in your home, I said. We know your schedule, Emma said. We know where you work, I said. We know where you sleep, Emma said. We know where you eat, I said. We know where you think you're safe, Emma said. And you'll never know which twin you're seeing, that we said together. Is that Emma at the grocery store or Olivia? I asked. Is that your wife at work or her sister? Emma asked. Is the woman in your apartment Emma coming back or Olivia breaking in? I asked. You'll never know, Emma said. You'll never be sure, I said. You'll never be safe, we said together. His face had gone gray. We were explaining to him exactly what he'd done to Emma, the constant fear, the inability to trust reality, the understanding that someone else controlled your sense of security. We were giving him a permanent dose of his own medicine. We have all the evidence of your abuse, I said, pulling up the files on my laptop. Every threat, every admission, every moment of cruelty, all time-stamped, all saved in multiple locations, all ready to send to the State Bar Association if you try anything. Your law firm wouldn't be happy to see this, Emma said. Your clients wouldn't be happy. Your reputation wouldn't survive it. So you're going to be smart, I said. You're going to sign the divorce papers, Emma said. You're going to accept whatever custody terms Emma offers for any shared property, I said. You're going to walk away, Emma said. And you're going to spend the rest of your life wondering, we said together. Wondering which twin you see in a crowd, I said. Wondering if we're watching you, Emma said. Wondering if we're planning something, I said. Wondering if this time it's real or if you're imagining it, Emma said. Wondering if you're losing your mind, I said. Or if we're just that good at making you think you are, Emma said. We stood up in perfect unison, moved to stand on either side of him, two identical faces looking down at the man who'd thought he could control my sister through fear. Do we have an understanding, Marcus? We asked together. He nodded, unable to speak, unable to do anything but acknowledge that his reign of terror was over. Good, I said. Now get out. Walk to the road, call a cab, go home, and start packing Emma's things because she'll be picking them up with a police escort next week. He stumbled to his feet, moving toward the door like a broken automaton. At the threshold, he turned back one last time. Which one of you is really Emma? He asked, his voice barely a whisper. We smiled identical smiles, cruel and satisfied. Does it matter? We asked together. You could never tell anyway. He left. We watched from the window as he walked down the long driveway toward the main road, his shoulders hunched, his confidence destroyed, his power shattered. Emma and I stood in the cabin we'd grown up visiting, watching the sunrise, and I felt her hand find mine. Two identical twins, closer than most people would ever understand, who just used their genetic advantage to destroy an abuser in ways the legal system never could. Thank you, Emma whispered. That's what sisters are for, I said, especially identical ones. 3 weeks later, Emma's divorce was finalized. Marcus had signed everything without fighting, had accepted terms that left him with almost nothing, had quietly resigned from his law firm claiming health reasons. The state bar hadn't been contacted because he'd complied perfectly, but the threat remained. One step out of line, one violation of the restraining order, and his entire career would end with the evidence we had. Emma moved into a new apartment downtown, one Marcus didn't know about. She started therapy to process 3 years of abuse. She reconnected with friends she'd been isolated from. She found herself again, piece by piece. And sometimes, late at night, Marcus would see a woman who looked like Emma at a restaurant, on the street, in a store. He'd freeze, trying to figure out if it was his ex-wife or her twin, trying to determine if he was being watched or if he was paranoid. He'd never know for sure. That was the point. We'd taken the thing abusers valued most, their certainty, their control, their power over reality, and we'd shattered it using nothing but our identical faces and the psychological warfare he'd taught my sister through years of cruelty. 2 months after the divorce, Emma called me laughing. "You'll never guess what happened." "What?" "Marcus had a breakdown at a coffee shop today. A friend told me. He saw a woman who looked like me, freaked out, started yelling about twins and surveillance, and had to be escorted out by security. They called it a psychotic break. He's on medical leave from his new job." I should have felt bad about that, but I didn't. He'd spent 3 years systematically destroying my sister's mental health. Now he was experiencing exactly what he'd put her through: the constant fear, the questioning of reality, the inability to trust his own perceptions. "Good," I said. "Maybe now he understands what he did to you." "Livy," Emma said, her voice serious, "what we did that weekend, was it wrong?" I thought about it honestly. We'd tortured him psychologically. We'd broken him. We'd used methods that were cruel and calculated, but we hadn't touched him, hadn't threatened violence, hadn't done anything illegal. We'd just made him feel powerless, confused, and afraid. "We gave him exactly what he gave you," I said finally. "If that's wrong, then what he did to you for 3 years was wrong first." She was quiet for a moment. Then, "I'm glad we're twins." "Me too," I said. "Especially identical ones." Emma is thriving now, 2 years after leaving Marcus. She's in a healthy relationship with someone who treats her as an equal. She's working again, her own career, her own money, her own independence. She's the person she used to be before Marcus tried to erase her. And Marcus? He moved to another state, works at a small firm, and according to mutual acquaintances, has never dated anyone seriously since his divorce. People who know him say he seems paranoid, constantly looking over his shoulder, never quite relaxed. I don't feel bad about that. Actions have consequences. He spent 3 years making my sister afraid in her own home. Now he gets to spend the rest of his life afraid that 2 identical twins are watching, waiting, ready to remind him what happens when you abuse someone who has a built-in ally with the same face. Some people might say what we did was cruel. I say it was justice. The kind of justice the system can't always provide, the kind that actually stops abusers instead of just giving them paperwork to ignore. My twin sister showed up at my door, beaten and crying. We swapped places, and together we taught her husband a lesson that will last forever. Not through violence, but through the one advantage we've always had, being so identical that no one, not even someone who lived with one of us for 3 years, could ever really tell us apart. And that uncertainty, that permanent doubt, that's his punishment. Forever wondering which twin he's seeing, forever questioning if we're there, forever afraid of the 2 identical faces that destroyed his power, using nothing but his own tactics, turned against him. If Emma's story of using her twin bond to escape abuse resonated with you, hit that like button. My favorite moment was when Marcus realized he couldn't tell us apart and everything he thought he controlled disappeared. What was yours? Drop it in the comments. And if you or someone you know is experiencing domestic violence, know that there are resources, there are options, and you don't have to stay. Subscribe for more stories about people who found creative ways to escape impossible situations.